Hi there, in this episode we're going to talk about how different European countries raced to set up colonies and empires in the New World. Before we can get to that part, though, we have to start talking about some events in Europe itself. And the biggest of those events that affect settlement in North America is the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation is a reform movement to fix Christianity. Before the Reformation, there was only one Christian church, and that was the Catholic Church. One of its priests, Martin Luther, thought that the church was corrupt. He hated the idea that the church was selling what were called indulgences. Think of an indulgence as a get-out-of-sin-free card, all except they weren't free. You paid for them. Basically, you were buying forgiveness, and depending on what the sin was, there was a different cost. He didn't think that this was very Christian-like, and is excommunicated from the Catholic Church for speaking out against it, and ends up making his own church. And this is where the idea of a Protestant or the Protestant church comes from. Now, his ideas are going to spread like wildfire across Europe because of a new piece of technology. That new technology is the printing press. And it's going to it's basically a medieval version of a copy machine. You could make multiple copies of the same piece of writing using little blocks that had carved letters on them. You would lay out the entire piece of paper that you wanted typed out. So multiple E's, multiple C's, multiple S's. You would have them all laid out, and then you would make multiple copies out of this. Now, the ideas of the Reformation are going to sweep across Europe, and it's going to cause a lot of conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants, and eventually it's going to lead to war. On top of that, we have all this drama going on in England. At the time, England was led by King Henry VIII. I'm sure you've probably heard some songs or stories, mythology about Henry VIII and how awful he is. Well, most of those are true. When it comes to King Henry VIII, he's going to start his own church. And he's going to do that because his wife, Catherine of Aragon, keeps having children, but they're girls. And he wants a son to take over the throne. He's going to go to the Pope and ask for a divorce. But in Catholic teachings, there is no divorce. So the King Henry tells the Pope, you know what, fine, I'm just going to start my own church. And he does this just that. He becomes the head of the Church of England, or what is also referred to as the Anglican Church. Now, when it comes to Henry VIII, he's founded this church so he could divorce his wife. But things are going to go wrong after his death. So there's going to be so much drama. At first, his son is going to take over, Edward VI. He's like 9 years old is all. And he's going to be on the throne until he's 15. He was a sickly child, and he's going to pass away at 15. When that happens, Edward's cousin, Lady Jane Grey, takes over, and she's on the throne for a whole whopping 9 days. What happens is Henry's daughter returns from Spain because she had been married off to Prince Philip, and is a Catholic because her husband was Catholic. And she's going to kill Lady Jane Grey and several hundred Protestants as well, as she takes over the throne of England. That's how she gets the nickname Bloody Mary. When Mary dies, Queen Elizabeth is going to take over, and she's going to move the country back from being Catholic to being Protestant. So it starts out Catholic, Henry makes it Protestant, then it goes to Bloody Mary and back to Catholic, and then it goes back to Protestant. So it's flip-flopping back and forth. And here's the thing. Whatever the king or queen says their religion is, they're forcing all the people to follow that religion as well. So it is so much drama, such a hot mess. Now, with all this going on, with Queen Elizabeth going back onto the throne after Mary dies, her husband in Spain isn't overly happy about this. So Queen Elizabeth starts having English sailors attack Spanish ships. They're stealing the gold and silver that's being brought back from the New World. King Philip II uses his wealth and Spain's political power and their military power to kind of lead a counter-reformation against the Protestants. So and what you need to realize is these people are related by marriage, so it's like fighting with your in-laws all over the place. What happens next, though, is Spain invades the Netherlands. And with time, England steps up and says, hey, they're Protestant too. We're Protestant. We're going to help them. So the drama is just spreading across Europe. Philip eventually sends his armada. An armada is this huge navy to England to overthrow Queen Elizabeth and the Anglican Church. But here's what happens. The British win. Their smaller ships are faster than the great big Spanish ships, and as a result, they kind of run circles around the ships. When the Spanish lose, it changes everything. Spain had been the superpower. They had the biggest military. They're the wealthiest nation. They're colonizing all over the place in the New World. But when they lose their armada to the British, it all kind of comes crumbling down. And as a result, the rest of Europe, England, France, the Netherlands, all start challenging Spain and their power in the Americas. What this is going to lead to is a ton of different European explorers are going to kind of go rushing into the New World, and especially North America. What they're looking for is called the Northwest Passage. Remember, Columbus was looking for a shortcut to get to Asia without going all the way around Africa. Well, they realize that South America is sort of in the way, so they start looking northward to see if there's a shortcut across North America. A lot of that hadn't been explored yet. The Spanish and the Portuguese were focused on Central and South America. So the rest of Europe kind of focuses on the northern part of the Americas. Explorers like John Cabot are going to be looking for a quick water route to Asia. He's going to explore all along the coast of Canada, looking for that Northwest Passage. Likewise, Jacques Cartier is going to sail along the St. Lawrence River, which is basically a border between the United States and what today is Canada, again, looking for that Northwest Passage. Henry Hudson is going to be English, but he's going to explore for the Dutch and ends up what today is around New York City. So we have all these different explorers vying for this Northwest Passage. So as hopefully you can see that North and South America are kind of getting carved up. The southern part is controlled by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and that leaves the northern part to be kind of fought over by the English, the French, the Dutch. They're all trying to expand their empires, and they're doing this because of mercantilism. If you have colonies, you can utilize those colonies to gather raw resources and then have markets to sell your finished goods to. So when it comes to the French in the New World, we talked last episode about how they too tried to settle in Florida but were driven off by the Spanish. They're going to focus instead now on the north. So explorers like Cartier and Champlain are going to claim for France what is pretty much today modern-day Canada, all along the St. Lawrence River. Explorers like La Salle are going to claim lands along the Mississippi River. Now, the French and the way they colonize is completely different from the Spanish. We talked about how the Spanish set up these different levels of society, and if you weren't Spanish, you were a lower rank. Well, the French aren't like that at all. For the most part, the French are fur traders. They're trapping. So they're not setting up whole towns and villages and cities. They're just out there hunting. And they're actually going to have better relationships with Native Americans because of this. They're not trying to steal their land and set up shop. They're just there to hunt. Many of the French explorers and the French settlers are actually going to end up marrying into Native American tribes. So they're not going to have some of the conflicts that we're going to talk about in the future between settlers and the Native Americans. So the last two groups we're going to talk about in this episode are New Netherlands, which are the Dutch. They're going to set up what today is New York City, back then called New Amsterdam, and we're going to have New Sweden, which is going to settle along the Delaware River, and they're going to set up New Christina. Eventually, these settlements are going to be lost to the British, and we'll talk about that at a later date. Okay, guys. That's it.